Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
You are now listening to Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting indigenous peoples across the globe. This October edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central and South America, Africa, Asia and beyond. Starting news from UN. On October 6, 2025, the United Nations Human Rights Council unanimously adopted a landmark resolution during its 60th session in Geneva, representing a significant global victory for indigenous peoples. This resolution primarily aims to improve the active and meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in UN meetings, policymaking, and negotiations across all 7 socio-cultural regions. Rather than serving merely as observers, indigenous peoples will be included as decision makers. The resolution also urges states to fully recognize, respect, and implement existing treaties with indigenous peoples. It emphasizes the importance of upholding the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and calls for concrete actions to address all forms of violence, discrimination, and threats against indigenous human rights defenders. Additionally, this move enhances the roles of key UN mechanisms and establishes an annual discussion on indigenous peoples' rights, which will commence in 2026. Moving to US. Despite having vast unappropriated water resources, Alaska's 229 federally recognized tribes face threats to critical subsistence resources due to development and fisheries management. This situation creates conflicts over water quality and fish populations, such as struggling Yukon River salmon. While Alaska is uniquely positioned to avoid the water allocation issues seen in the western US, the unique legal landscape following the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act means that traditional reservation-based water rights are largely unavailable. Instead, there are opportunities to leverage the state's constitution, which mandates that water appropriation must consider the general reservation of the fish and wildlife, as well as its in-stream flow laws. However, the state has impeded tribal efforts to secure these in-stream flow reservations, making proactive management, including increased stream gogging and timely adjudication, crucial for protecting Alaska's water and cultural resources of its indigenous peoples. In Canada, the Haida Nation's Aboriginal title to the 1 million hectare archipelago of Haida Gui has been largely cemented by the British Columbia Supreme Court consent order on September 5, 2025. This move validates a unique 2024 agreement between the Haida Nation, British Columbia, and Ottawa, ensuring the nation no longer has to prove the title's existence. While the order constitutionally protects the title, the pact explicitly assures private landowners that their ownership status remains unchanged. The next 2 years will focus on negotiating the transition of governance for Crown land tenures and parks, with Haida Nation President Gagwish Jason Alsop stating the order firmly recognized and affirmed and protected their title. In Australia, a 2-year project by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisations, Australia's National Science Agency, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander organisations has identified 3 critical priorities for responsible AI use in Indigenous healthcare, ensuring cultural sensitivity and self-determination. The core findings stress the need to build AI health literacy and cultural appropriateness, ensuring transparency and real-world education, maintain Indigenous organizations' custodianship of health data, and enforce self-determination in AI development, demanding communities be involved from the outset. Leaders stressed that AI must, quote, reflect our voices, our data, and our ways of knowing, unquote, warning that neglecting indigenous-led governance risks perpetuating bias and historical mistakes. These priorities now inform the development of new AI tools aimed at improving health outcomes. Now news from Africa. Starting from South Africa. A new genomic study of more than 1,200 individuals from across South Africa has shed light on how colonial European settlers, indigenous Khoisan groups, and enslaved populations contributed to the modern South African gene pool. The research published in the American Journal of Human Genetics reveals that European-derived genetic material is most concentrated around Cape Town and gradually diminishes in more distant regions. Strikingly, the study finds a sex-biased pattern in ancestral contributions. European ancestry is predominantly male, while Khoisan ancestry is predominantly female. By comparing participants' genomes with reference datasets and examining sex chromosomes versus autosomes, the researchers inferred that colonial era gene flow was shaped by social and demographic forces. Enslaved individuals from equatorial Africa and parts of Asia also contributed to the gene pool, albeit without a strong sex bias. The work offers a powerful genetic record of how colonial expansion and interactions with indigenous societies were inscribed into South Africa's population history. In Kenya, the Kenya Red Cross is set to activate its early action protocol in Samburu County in anticipation of a looming drought following forecast of below-average rainfall in the October to December short rainy season. The decision comes after weather projections from both Kenya Meteorological Department and indigenous forecasters presented at a recent participatory scenario planning meeting signaled a deteriorating drought situation. According to Samburu County Red Cross Coordinator Japta Olekiremo, the intervention will focus on providing drought-tolerant seeds, rehabilitating water infrastructure, promoting hygiene and sanitation, and distributing livestock fodder. Early warning messages will also be disseminated through local radio broadcasts to keep farmers and herders informed. Samburu, a predominantly pastoralist community in Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands, is expected to face escalating challenges including water scarcity and rising food prices. Joseph Lotwin, a National Drought Management Authority coordinator, warned that the county could soon enter a drought alert phase. In preparations, the National Drought Management Authority has updated its county drought contingency plan, which includes water tracking and coordinated grazing strategies. Lotwin also noted that 8,344 vulnerable households in Samburu are currently receiving support through the National Hunger Safety Net program, which offers unconditional cash transfers to help families afford food and stabilize the local livestock market. Now news from Asia. Starting from Bangladesh, communal violence tragically escalated in Khagrachari Hill District, Bangladesh, culminating in deadly clashes on September 28 after weeks of rising tensions. The unrest began following the alleged gang rape of a Marma indigenous schoolgirl by 3 Bengali settlers on September 23. Peaceful protest by the indigenous Juma people demanding justice led to attacks by Bengali settlers on indigenous localities, reportedly with unquestionable law enforcement support. The subsequent district-wide blockade resulted in the killing of at least 3 indigenous individuals and dozens of injuries. The violence also involved widespread destruction, including the burning of at least 26 houses and 54 subs belonging to indigenous peoples. The Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact strongly condemns this brutal violence and demands an immediate impartial investigation to hold all perpetrators accountable. In Cambodia, predatory lending practices by Cambodian microfinance institutions backed by international investors, including the World Bank's International Finance Cooperation, is causing widespread land dispossessions and human rights abuses among indigenous communities in Cambodia's northeastern provinces. These microfinance institutions aggressively market loans, often using indigenous land as collateral without adequate consent or comprehension of the terms frequently delivered in Khmer. The resulting over-indebtedness has led to coerced land sales, debt-driven suicides, and loss of access to essential services. Cambodian authorities and international backers are urged to protect indigenous rights and ensure remedies, including the recovery of land and debt restructuring. Human Rights Watch report reveals predatory microfinances loans and exploitation of Cambodia's indigenous peoples have pushed families further into poverty instead of acting as a path out. In India, indigenous tribes in India's northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh are fiercely protesting a proposed hydroelectric mega dam project, fearing displacement and a loss of their cultural identity tied to a Siang River known upstream in Tibet as Yarlung Sangpo. The dam is India's strategic response to a massive upstream project by China, which India worries could be used to control water flow and potentially release a water bump downstream, despite Beijing's assurance of no negative impact. The proposed Siang Upper multi-purpose project would be India's largest dam, intended to stock water and produce power, but residents like the Adi people have vowed to fight till the end of time, arguing the project feels like a death sentence that would submerge their villages and erase their community from the map. In Philippines, indigenous peoples' human rights defenders in Asia have raised their voices in a strong solidarity with Ivaloi and Kankanaey communities in Benguet, Philippines, who are battling the expansion and renewal of mining licenses for Itogon Suyak Resources Inc. and Crescent Mining and Development Corporation. For over a century, large-scale mining has inflicted severe environmental damage and caused displacement, with current operations posing threats of landslides and ground subsidence. Indigenous communities contend that their right to free, prior, and informed consent under the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act has been repeatedly violated, with Crescent Mining and Development Corporation's license renewal in 2022 and Itogon Suyak Resources Inc.'s current expansion application proceedings through flawed or defective consent processes, ignoring consistent local opposition. The Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact condemns the manipulative free, prior, and informed consent procedures and persistent disregard for indigenous self-determination. In Nepal, the Nepalese government's plan to develop the country's largest iron deposit in Jumlabang, a remote farming area, is facing intense opposition from local residents and indigenous people's rights activists. The project, intended to boost national steel self-sufficiency and granted as concession to Ramesh Steels, a mining company, has ignited a conflict over indigenous people's land rights. Community members relying on the land for their survival claim the government bypassed their right to free, prior, and informed consent under international law. They fear displacement, severe water pollution, and destruction of ancestral forests. Despite assurances from officials and the company regarding due process, villagers are vowing to resist the mine's construction. This escalating battle underscores a major national clash between economic development goals and the protection of local livelihoods and cultural traditions. Now, news from Americas. Starting from Bolivia. Indigenous women from Amazon eastern lowlands and Altiplano regions of Bolivia led a significant protest in La Paz on 29 September, demanding urgent action against the rampant forest fires that annually destroy millions of hectares of their ancestral lands. The march, which traversed the city's main avenues, also voiced a strong rejection of threats like illegal mining in their territories. Dozens of people joined the demonstrators, including Rosa Pachuri, president of a regional organization of Chiquentano indigenous women. Pachuri emphasized the gravity of the crisis. Quote, "Once again, our territories are burning. They are burning our big houses," unquote, she stated. The demonstrators traveled to the capital to ensure their collective voices were heard regarding the ecological catastrophe engulfing the nation's forests. In Ecuador, 7 indigenous nationalities in Ecuadorian Amazon have strongly criticized a government plan to auction dozens of land blocks for oil and gas explorations, citing threats to their ancestral territories. The Ministry of Energy and Mines announced the August plan to offer 49 energy projects valued at over $47 billion. Leaders from groups, including the Anduasuar and Waurani people, denounced that 18 of the proposed blocks, an area comparable to the size of Belgium, directly overlap with their lands. They assert the government failed to conduct necessary consultations and is intentionally ignoring previous court rulings that deemed similar past processes unconstitutional. The communities accuse the administration of violating their constitutional rights and jeopardizing the rainforest ecosystem for economic gain. In Guatemala, on International Indigenous Women's Day, the powerful "Tu Voz Resiste" Your Voice Resists campaign was launched in Guatemala to highlight and combat the structural racism faced by indigenous women. This collective initiative underscores their resistance, identity, and vital contribution to society. The campaign originated from a participatory process where women from over 10 departments shared their experiences, transforming personal testimonies into collective messages. These messages are now being widely disseminated through diverse channels, including radio spots in Mayan languages, community loudspeaker announcements, posters, bus advertisements, and social media, ensuring their voices resonate nationally against discrimination. In Colombia, indigenous peoples from 9 nations across South and Central America convened in Bogota, Colombia from September 16 to 19 for a critical 4-day regional meeting. Organized by the National Commission on Indigenous Territories, the summit focused on the strategic deployment of Geographic Information System as a fundamental tool for land protection. Delegations from countries including Ecuador, Brazil, and Panama shared successful methodologies and addressed challenges in using the technology for mapping, monitoring, and protecting their ancestral lands. The main objective was to promote the exchange of lessons learned, ultimately bolstering territorial sovereignty, enforcing fundamental rights, and ensuring cultural survival for communities throughout the region. In Argentina, the Nahuelpan Mapuche Tehuelche community has won a 4-year territorial dispute after a landmark ruling on September 3, 2025. The Civil, Commercial, and Labor Court of Pascual ordered the immediate reopening of their ancestral road connecting homes to the city. The conflict began in February 2021 when media entrepreneur Maria Elena Spell Paki illegally blocked the vital access, installing a locked gate and a massive ditch. This act of dispossession led to extreme isolation, crucially preventing ambulances from the Squall Regional Hospital from reaching families. Representing the community, Lanco Angel Victoriano Gilanco and his wife Catalina Elvira Lancacaro, supported by attorney Sonia Ivanov, successfully demanded the restoration of the historic route through a possessory action, ensuring their right to travel is upheld. in Honduras. The Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organization of Honduras, along with the Nueva Esperanza community, filed a formal complaint on September 18, 2025, targeting the Ministry of Education and other government entities. The action addresses the severe dispossession and violence faced by 8 indigenous families who have been recovering abandoned land for 5 years. State forces have ordered 2 violent evictions since February 2023, leaving the families in makeshift camp by highway and exposed to significant risks. The Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organization of Honduras asserts that the legal basis for these actions relies on false titles, pointing to clear institutional complicity in criminalization and displacement of communities defending their right to ancestral land. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky. If you have found this program valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. You can also follow us on TikTok at Radio Derecho Indigenas.